Welcome to the Happy Dog, Happy Human podcast, where we explore the intersection between human mental health and our relationships with dogs. This is Sharon.
And I'm Angela. In season 2, we're exploring social and cultural phenomena that impact our well-being so we can reduce stigma and challenge the status quo, while also learning better ways to care for ourselves and our dogs throughout the journey. We hope you love it.
So we're going to start with some updates about Cloud Doodles and Human Canine Collaborative. So I'm going to start by sharing that I wrote a workbook. It's called Sensory Safety Planning. So I'm kind of going in this direction of exploring sensory processing in regard to dog behavior and human-dog relationships. Partially because that's like my sensory experience is such a part of my mental health and how I just experience the world. And so I'm just really diving into that. So I wrote this workbook, Sensory Safety Planning, because I needed to develop a process for myself to reflect and problem solve on situations that were difficult with Muggins. And it ended up being like social situations that Muggins was a part of were really difficult because I'm so sensitive that I'm absorbing all the sensation that comes in, and there's just a lot going on around me, and I get overwhelmed, and everything seems to be happening so fast, that like in the moment I can't problem solve or like figure out what to do, or I just get overwhelmed and forget that I do know what to do. So I developed this process to reflect on the sensory experience and do some problem solving to identify what tools can I use to feel more comfortable in my body, or what can I ask Muggins to do, or what boundaries can I set with Muggins or with other people. So it ended up coming out as a workbook, and I'm really excited about it. It's a digital workbook, so you can download it from my site, and it's just a little way for me to make a little extra income as well. So it's $22, and then you have the workbook, and you can use it for one situation, or you can use it again and again in various situations. And I hope that it's as helpful for you all as it has been for me.
Sounds great. I think we can all relate to moments where we have sensory overload with our pups on walks, especially maybe interacting with other pups or other people. Sometimes those situations can feel overwhelming and we freeze. I can definitely relate to that. So being able to reflect back and make a plan for future situations like that sounds really, really awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you have any other updates?
Yeah, along the same lines of exploring the sensory experience with dogs, I'm doing a series of workshops with behavior vets in August and September called Sensory Beings. So we're going to explore the neurophysiology of sensory processing in dogs and humans and understand how that impacts the nervous system and behavior. And we're also going to explore ways that we can evaluate a dog's sensory processing patterns and identify things like touch sensitivity or sound sensitivity, or patterns of sensitivity that might contribute to anxiety or aggressive behavior. And so those are one's on August 15th, and the next one is on September 12th. So you can go to the link in my bio on Instagram to learn more about it and sign up.
Wow, how interesting. Mm-hmm. All right, on the Cloud Doodles updates, we launched a new pattern called Paws Under the Rainbow about a month ago, and we have a harness, leash, and poop bag set, as well as a raincoat on our website. And all of our patterns have a special mental health meaning, and this one is a double entendre, spelled PAWS, WS under the rainbow, but means pause, PAUSE under the rainbow,
Love that.
uh, meaning to take some time to sit with and reflect after a storm, an emotional storm, maybe a literal storm,
Mm.
and maybe something difficult has happened in your life. And after moving through that, the idea is to pause and reflect and take um, maybe the good or what could be good from that experience.
Mm. I love
Yeah.
that. Oh, that's really cool because I think it's so important to pause after difficult experiences and just um, to reorient, to yourself and what's going on. Also to like care for yourself and whatever you need, make sure that your needs are met.
Yeah, exactly. That's the exact sentiment behind it.
Nice.
And moving forward, again, some human accessory and clothing line is going to be launched soon, which is really exciting with some Cloud Doodles quotes that are all about how our relationship with our pups and how they impact us. So there will be some graphic t-shirts. There will also be some um, beach totes with the classic prints on them. So lots of really fun stuff about to come out that I'm really excited about. So you can match your dog and just be all Cloud Doodles, Cloud Doodles fashioned out.
Awesome. Oh, that's really exciting. I'm so jazzed to see the designs when they come out.
Thank you. Thank you.
Cool. So, do you have any other updates?
No, I don't. I think that's about it.
Cool. So, yeah, so make sure to check out Angela's stuff at clouddoodles.com and check out my work as well at hc-collab.com.
Awesome.
And I just want to mention that I'm playing with Theraputty. I got a new set. And so I just want to mention it because sometimes it's kind of like taffy, like the texture of it, but sometimes I'll fold it and it makes an air bubble and then it pops like bubble gum. So I just want to mention that in case people are hearing that because it might sound strange if you don't know what it is.
It's funny, I was seeing you playing with it, and I also was as you were talking about the sensory book, and I was thinking, oh, well, she's practicing what she's preaching.
Exactly.
Playing with the putty while we're talking.
Yeah, it's so helpful because I really like to have something to do with my hands when I'm like talking. And the Theraputty is really firm. So it's like I really have to squeeze it in order to play with it, which is really calming for me.
It's funny, that's also why I started doodling and why we have cloud doodles, because that was always very calming for me and helped me focus because I have ADHD, so I need something to do with my hands while I'm listening, especially in class and things like that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's very helpful to have those types of those de-stressors, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And doodling, I think, can be so meaningful. Also, I think there's something about doing something meaningful with your hands that has like a double effect on the
Yeah, well, there's also a result which can end up being something quite interesting when you're doodling.
yeah.
But if you do it without, the idea of doodling is that you draw without something in mind particularly. So it's a mindfulness exercise also. You're putting the pen to the paper and you're just letting it go as your mind goes.
Cool. Yeah, that's a good point.
So, we are re-recording this podcast episode, which is the episode 1 of season 2. And it's a little bit ironic because the topic's on perfectionism. And actually, I think it's great we are re-recording it because we are tackling our own perfectionist tendencies and trying to be less perfectionisty by re-recording it.
Yes. And that sounds backwards because it sounds like we're re-recording it because it wasn't perfect enough.
That's true.
That's not why we're doing this.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. I think
That's true.
when I listened to the first recording, actually, it wasn't even listening to it, it was how I felt afterward. That I think I told you, I broke out in hives after recording that episode. And I was like, and that happens to me quite often, unfortunately, is that I get just itchy red blotches on my face when I'm stressed. And my body is really good at being like, no, you're feeling something that needs your attention. And then my body will explode with hives so that I pay attention. But it made me really think, like, what was it about that recording that was stressful? And I think it helped me realize that I think the way I put it when we talked about it was we were talking about perfectionism, but we weren't naming the perfectionism in the room when we were recording.
I can definitely agree with that. And I really liked what you said, though, that it felt like a train that we couldn't get off of.
Yeah.
And I think, well, the way that I interpret what you just said about the perfectionism, naming the perfectionism in the room, is that there's a performative aspect when we hit record because we know that anybody will be able to listen to us. And maybe we do put on a little bit of a mask. And maybe our masks for both of us is probably more of a professional mask and trying to put on that, the quote unquote expert role.
Yeah,
And that's what makes us anxious also.
it does.
And I also think that the biggest feedback that has felt important to me, I don't know if you feel the same, Sharon, has been people telling us that they can feel our authenticity.
Mm.
And that is definitely true. And we're definitely in the last season was not just, we're all wearing a mask, both of us. But I think that we can be even more authentic, not in a perfectionisty way,
Right, perfect.
but that, yeah. And well, that we can, because, we have conversations, not recording. And I think you mentioned also that it feels different. And maybe it's not noticeably different when we put this up. I'm not sure if it will be or not, but I think what feels different is that, yeah, there's not this performative aspect and it's just you and me talking. And we want to bring more of that in season 2 of just us having these conversations that we have
Yeah,
about life and about our feelings and when we're vulnerable with each other and support each other. And when we have these casual conversations, a lot of these topics come up, which is why we chose perfectionism, for example, because it's something that has driven us both. Um, and I think something I noticed after the first recording that was almost, I mean, maybe it was enlightening, but it made me realize how much perfectionism still runs through me.
yeah.
And I consider myself a recovering perfectionist,
Mm.
but there's an emphasis on the recovering because, like a recovering addict, I don't think it's something that you're ever really recovered from.
Mm.
And when I'm under stress, I definitely turn to those um, coping skills. Coping style, maybe, is a good way to talk about it. Yeah, just this need it is very tied up with anxiety, I think, the
Yeah.
perfectionist tendencies, but and this need to control things. But I remember the next day what happened for me, and this is something that happens to me often, is I wake up in the morning, I see the list on in my notebook, And by the way, I have lists everywhere on my iPhone and my notebook. Like I have to do lists, probably part of the ADHD also. Otherwise I forget things. Um, and they're everywhere, scribbled everywhere. Um,
Oh, like a way that you're organizing yourself, but also like it's important to write things down so you don't forget.
it is, and it's a good thing. But I look at those lists sometimes and I get so overwhelmed, and I am so afraid of the feeling of what it'll mean if I don't get the list done by the time my kid gets home.
Yeah.
Um, and that it's really a feeling of like impending doom, or that like I'm a bad person. I'm a bad person if I don't do this. And that's so much of how perfectionism has driven my life, is by scaring myself into thinking I'm a bad person or worthless or whatever word, I'm not enough, whatever words come up for you. Um, by using that as like fuel to complete things. It's very twisted. Do you
Hmm.
relate to that, Sharon?
Yeah. So like it's what you're describing is this like this internal motivation that is coming from this belief that your self-worth is related to what you achieve.
Yes, exactly. And I think you said it so well. That is the essence of perfectionism.
Mhm. Thank you. You've told me before I'm very good with words.
You are, but you just described my rambling very well. But I really think that what you said right there, that was essence of, I think, what perfectionism is.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I do relate to that. I can there's a lot of ways in which I feel like my self-worth is related to what I achieve. I was just telling you earlier this morning that I'm feeling really insecure about my work right now. Um, and it's totally related to like a lot of it comes out when I look at Instagram,
Mm,
like
yes.
how many
Yeah.
likes did I get on this post or how many followers? But also being a business owner, it's like how many sales am I making? And like my worth as a professional is tied to how much money I make. And when when there are highs and lows when you're a small business owner. And so during those lows, when there's not as much flow into the business, it's really hard to stay motivated and to feel like I'm good at this. I should be doing this.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I completely relate as being a small business owner. And for me, it's the same as like what sales. Usually we equate success with money,
Mhm.
uh, how we look, right? Um,
How much we can do, like productivity, how busy we
productivity, absolutely.
are. Mhm.
What else? I mean, culturally, right? Like culturally, there are certain things that, how many friends we have.
Yeah,
That's a big one, especially when you're a teenager.
right, right. Whether or not you're married or having kids.
Yeah. Having kids. So we have these cultural, social norms that are markers in a way
Yeah.
of your worth, that have nothing to do with you intrinsically.
Mhm.
And that we feel that if people looking at us, they're judging us based on those markers.
Mm.
Educational degrees, but of course it depends also, like what, because culture is so many different things, right? So it's within your family culture,
Mhm.
within your nationality, uh, within your gender,
Mm.
within your sexuality, whatever. There's norms in all of these
Mhm.
subcultures
Right.
that we are a part of.
Mhm.
And all of those subcultures seem to have these sort of markers
Mhm.
of what success is, which is interesting. I just realized that. It's
Mm,
It's very I mean, maybe it's quite human nature. Maybe it's because of the pecking order. You
mm,
know, we socially want to compare ourselves
mhm,
to understand like this person goes here and this person goes there to categorize. It's very
mm,
human nature.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, I think our brains wanna understand things and categorize things. I mean, that happens very, very young in development, that we start to put things in categories or associate things that are similar versus things that are different. And I think that it somehow it continues even when we're not infants anymore, but we grow up and our brains still want to do that simplification and categorization where it becomes this where everything becomes reduced to like this or that, one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, I we talked about this in our last recording, and I think when I thought more about this idea of this or that, what it is that we and I think this is what I was trying to say last time because I was talking about in nature, what we see a lot of is contrast. I
Mm,
think that's the this or that.
yeah,
So like dark or light, soft or hard.
night or day.
Um, yeah, exactly. Like things like that, like liquid or ice, you know, whatever. There's contrast, moon and sun.
Hmm.
And I think that that's how humans categorize things. And I see my daughter does that. So she's 3 and she categorizes things in the this or that. So,
Hmm.
and it's all contrast related. So her favorite thing is to tell me, you have a big belly, I have a small belly. But she's contrasting, like you're a big person, I'm a little person.
Yeah,
Um,
like trying to understand like this is a way that we're different, or like this is who I am. Also, it's part of
yes,
her developing who she is.
absolutely. And she like loves her long hair. So that's like a very for her, that's becoming I guess a part of her identity, right? So she says long hair, you know, short hair to somebody who has short hair,
Yeah, yeah,
for example. And so, but that's also a contrast, right?
yeah. Hmm.
It's long and short, big and small. You know, for her, the two primary caregivers in her life are mama and papa, and that's a contrast to her also.
Yeah.
So she sees characters on TV and she says mama and papa
Mm,
uh, to differentiate them.
mhm. Yeah, and that's how she understands, like, people's roles and family structures and things too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think maybe that's where this sort of this or that comes from. And back to perfectionism, I feel like perfectionism is driven a lot by the this or that. It's all or nothing. It's black or white. It's good and bad.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
it's very, very extreme.
Yes, very binary.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
And I mean, I also have been diagnosed with bipolar
Mm,
too in my teen years. And that's the same idea, right? Like it's also the two poles.
right. Yeah.
And my behavior as a teenager, even when I was young, was always very extreme.
Mm,
Um, and my dad actually said when even when I was very young that I used to tell him in the same day, this is the best day of my life, and this is the worst day of my life.
oh, interesting. Mm,
But I also wonder how much of the perfectionism also drove that for me because my mentality was always be perfect or fuck it. There
mm,
was no
mhm,
in between. And I still struggle with that to
mhm.
this day,
Yeah,
especially around food. That's my big
yeah,
food and alcohol.
wow. Do you feel like it's can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Do you feel like it's this idea that, like, for a while, like, I was remembering at the beginning of the conversation, you were saying like like there's a motivational piece to this, like chasing perfectionism. And so with all or nothing thinking, is it like you get to a point where you're like realize I can't, like this, I can't be perfect. There's no, it's not possible or it's not working. And then that's why you're like going to, well, fuck it then. If I can't win this perfectionism game, then there's no point in even trying.
Absolutely. And I think so, I think as a teenager, when, this sort of perfectionism drove my life, there are two very big ways that I can see what you're saying in. And so we talked about food, which is I am also in recovery for an eating disorder. And again, that one's also emphasis on recovery because it's something I struggle with every day
Mhm.
still. I have a much better handle on it, but it's still an issue for me. And from a very young age, I remember being 8 years old, thinking that I needed to be skinny, and skinny meaning emaciated,
Mm.
because I grew up at the time with the trashy magazines and Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan all running in Hollywood. And they were all very emaciated. Nicole Richie was my ideal,
Mhm.
and I don't have her body type at all. She's 5'2" and has a very small build, to start with, and also seemed to have an eating disorder at the time. And that was something you saw in the magazines a lot. Mary Kate has an eating disorder, goes to rehab, and I kind of idealized these women.
Right. It was almost
You
like
know,
status to be like
yes,
that.
absolutely. It was a status. It was made you special or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they got a lot of attention,
Got attention. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And so that gave me this body image that I thought I needed to achieve to
Mm.
get, I guess, you know what, to get attention. I think part of the perfectionism is also that you get positive reinforcement a lot of times. And when I was losing weight, um, and becoming very thin at 15, people told me I looked great.
Mm.
And I was getting attention. And then I was getting negative attention, like you're too skinny, blah, blah, blah. But I liked it.
Right.
Uh, and but then it became too hard, like you said.
Yeah.
It became too hard to maintain, uh, being underweight and eating so little. It's
Mhm.
not easy.
No, it's not.
Um, and yeah, so I think I started going in the opposite direction
Mm.
and binge eating and purging, and I lived my life like that for various years. And
Mm.
yo-yo dieting. I mean, yo-yo dieting is an eating disorder. Many people do it.
Ah.
Um, and now I want to find my middle path. I
Mm.
think that's my perfectionism in recovery.
Mhm.
I want to find my middle path. I don't want to be in the fuck it, and I don't want to be in the, hyperactive bionic woman, need to do it all, state.
Because both of those are so unhealthy.
They are so self-destructive. And the other way that that played a role was in high school, also very noticeable, was, I would get good grades, but I could never be the best student
Mm.
and, or the smartest. And so I rebelled against that. And again, it would flip flop. And I rebelled against that sometimes. Sometimes I would actually try to get the best grades.
Mhm.
And which made me a decent student, actually.
Right. Yeah, because you're
um, but not good enough to go to Harvard. See,
like,
that's the thinking.
interesting.
Not good enough to go to Harvard, but I would say fuck it sometimes. And I'm gonna be the perfect rebel and the perfect party girl,
Mhm.
because that I can do.
Wow. I want to check in because you're sharing very vulnerable stuff, and I appreciate it because it's so relatable. Like, I relate to a lot of what you're saying. But I want to check in because realized um, we had talked about this, but we didn't do a care tip at the top of this conversation.
No, we didn't.
But I'm wondering, would you like to do one now? Like,
Yeah,
how are you feeling, and what kind of care do you need?
I actually would, and I have an idea for one. So maybe if that's okay, can I lead us in one?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool. All right. So if you can, close your eyes
Mhm.
and get in a comfortable seated position or standing. And let's take one deep breath in through our nose and out through our mouth. And I want you to feel like you are being enveloped in a golden light that's warm, feels yummy, and it's going all around you, and you're in this shimmery, golden, warm, yummy bubble. And I would like to picture right in front of you the healthiest version of you. What does this person look like? What does their hair look like? What does their mouth look like? Are they smiling? Are they in a power stance? Are they sitting? What are they wearing? And most importantly, how do they feel? At peace, harmonious, synchronized, integrated, calm, powerful, strong. Now I want you to imagine that this version of you is merging with the rest of your body and sitting into your body, becoming one with you, and grabbing hold of that driver's seat because they are you. And let's take one deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth. When you're ready, open your eyes.
Mm, I like that one. I didn't know what to expect when you said close your eyes, but I was like, okay, here we go.
Me neither. That just came on the spot. That was completely impulsive.
Nice. I really like that. I have never done a mindfulness where I pictured my like healthiest self.
Yeah, I don't think I have either. I mean, the idea came to me um, because my therapist, who actually taught me most about perfectionism
Mm,
and the idea of it and how it might be driving my behaviors,
mm,
she had me draw out all the different parts of myself
mm,
and what they look like. And that included the healthiest me.
mm,
And it was sort of a way to understand how all these parts play a role in how I behave or how I connect with people.
Mhm.
um, why I do the things I do to cope, and that they all need to be integrated and they all need to find a way to live together harmoniously, but
Mhm.
to also have that healthy one be the one driving
Mhm. Yeah.
and be the one in charge.
Yeah. That's a great, it's just like a great image I'm thinking of because it's so anti-binary, right? There's not like a good version of you and a bad version of you, or just a healthy version and an unhealthy. There are like many components and many versions and many parts, and they're all valid. They're all necessary, and it's okay to be any of them and all of them.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. And that, we all have parts of ourselves that are not our favorite, and that's okay. Um, we're human. And I think categorizing things as good and bad inside of yourself is very self-destructive also. And doesn't appreciate the nuance of who you are as a
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
and that you aren't just the angel and the devil on your shoulder. There's so much more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank
May
you.
I ask? You're welcome. May I ask what your healthy version was like? I'm curious.
Ooh, I instantly had this picture of myself with a completely shaved head. You were saying about hair, and that image came before you
Yeah.
mentioned what does the hair look like. I was like, oh, my head would be totally shaved, and I was sort of like dressed in robes like a monk, and like in a
Ooh.
garden. Like I was thinking of enlightenment, and like I've had this fantasy sometime, many times in my life, of like I just want to run away and to a monastery and be a monk. And I think that's part of like that all or nothing thinking. Like if I can't figure out how to be part of society, then I just want to run away from it and be not part of it.
That's interesting, but that also came up as your healthiest
Yeah,
person. So,
interesting.
but I wonder if it's because of the feeling that that monk self would have, which is unconcerned and unattached
Mhm. Yeah,
with, yeah, with the things that run your life, I guess.
right. With like status and wealth and whatever, professionalism.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And I think
Have,
there's also this, also gender is in there, I think, because as my healthiest self, I was sort of like, it wasn't like, oh, being like, oh, the best business woman or a wife or something like that. It was like a monk, which can be like, to me, like genderless or
yeah, definitely.
like just beyond that binary as well as the good bad binary.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense also. It's funny because mine has like a Buddha bun and is in a yoga pose. So it's a little bit of a similar
Yeah.
vibe.
Hmm.
And with smile wrinkles, like it's also in the normal body type. Like it's also rebelling against,
Hmm.
I think, what the rigidity of what we typically think of as female, or what the perfect female is.
Yeah.
Um, because any of these contrasts are very imprisoning
Hmm.
emotionally.
Yeah. That's such a great word. I feel like I've felt that in, yeah, within gender, like this imprisonment of like, if you're a girl or a woman, you have to be a certain way, right? Like you have to be dainty and delicate and skinny and soft and quiet and compliant, agreeable, like all of these things that are just like, I feel such intense resistance
Mm.
to the rigidity of that and to the ways in which I don't fit into that.
It's so interesting. I sometimes think that that's why I have that very strong rebelliousness to just get fat, for lack of better words, because it's also like an FU to
Right.
needing to be this like perfect skinny girl.
Mhm.
But I
Yeah.
flip flop and I still do. Like I flip flop with those things in my head.
Mhm. Yeah, it's really hard because it's so there's well with body weight, there's such a hyperfixation on weight as like a marker of health, right? And
Mhm.
so it's like you get brainwashed into believing like, oh, if I'm not skinny, then I'm not healthy. And that's just not true. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean, being skinny is can be so unhealthy. Like I am a skinny person and it's not because this sounds really like, I feel like I have such, in a way, like, oh, I'm so lucky. Like it's hard for me to put weight on. Um, and it feels very like privileged, right? But at the same time, the reason I have a hard time putting weight on is because my body, like, it just doesn't work the same way that it used to. And my digestive organs don't absorb nutrients the way that they used to. And my appetite is not the way that it used to be. And like, I can't eat things, I can't eat the same things I used to eat. I can't eat dairy anymore, and like, and I feel, but I have this skinny body that people are like, oh, look, you're so healthy, and so it
Right.
creates this situation in which I feel um like I have to hide the struggles that I have with food.
That's so interesting you say that because for a long time, because of my own eating issues, I would look at someone like you and feel very jealous, which has been a big side note, a big way that I've combated my own perfectionism is to really try to not compare myself to people or to observe. Because look, we're going to look at people and we're going to make observations. We're human. Do we need to make a judgment from that observation? No. So I can observe you and say you're skinny and not have a judgment on it, right?
Mm,
Try to. But I have a friend who I think has one of the best looking bodies, and she has very severe autoimmune disorders, and
mm,
she is very sick. And the way that the struggle that she has had to keep on weight, to also deal with people being jealous in society and making comments like, oh, she must have an eating disorder and blah, blah, blah.
mm,
She really taught me that like I mean, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. You don't know what's going on in somebody's life.
right.
And just because they might have what we think is the perfect body, the way she has it, I mean, some of it's genetic, obviously, but the reason that she has it is also because she's extremely ill.
Yeah. Mm, no, feeling.
Duchess is barking.
Oh, does she need some help?
No, it's probably because the neighbor dog came to the door.
Okay. If you need to take a break and
She's
help
fine.
out, totally.
Yes, I'm just letting you know she's barking
Yeah.
because it's loud.
Thank you.
Our neighbor's dog, side note, loves to come in and pee in our house. And she and Orso, his name is, which means bear in Italian, they have like a love-hate relationship. It's very funny. He kind of loves her and he's always trying to court her. And she's into it sometimes.
Depending on the day.
It's very toxic, their relationship. Super abusive on her end, not on his.
Yeah,
He
she's
just
playing
keeps
with him.
coming back for
Aw. Oh man,
poor
did
guy. Anyway.
you froze for a
Hmm?
second? You froze for a
Yeah,
second.
I saw that too. I saw that too.
Sorry, listeners, for the glitch there.
Yeah, I think it's okay now.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
anyway, so I'm curious for you, how has perfectionism looked in your life, and maybe where do you think it came from for you?
Ooh, that's a great question. Perfectionism has looked like, well, like you talked about school, so I can relate to that. Like I was always a straight A student and um like really focused like that. It was really I'm trying to think of like a specific example, but there were times, yeah, I even in high school, it was like I knew how to do school, right? I knew how to do that. And so I would put a lot of effort into that, but also there was a lot of fear of like messing up, like it almost didn't occur to me to slack off because in my mind there was no other way. Like you have to go to school and you're supposed to do your work and get good grades and study, and you can't mess up with that. Like, and it was like this whole your whole future is dependent on it, right? Like your test scores and your GPA, and like you have to get into college and then you have to do well there so that you can get a good job. And so I always put a lot of focus on that to the extreme, right? Like to the point where I didn't know how to be social, you know, or like if I did make a mistake or have a test coming up or something, like it was stressful. I had to like go overboard with it, and I would develop this like um if there was a certain project that I had that I was interested in, I would go really overboard with it. With like researching it and working on it and like working on it so much to try to get it just right. Um, so yeah, so that I think is a lot of perfectionism, like really just trying to do
Definitely.
it right and trying to be so careful with that pursuit. And along the same lines, I was involved in gymnastics growing up. Gymnastics is all about perfectionism, all of it. It's like you have to have the perfect body. You have to do things perfectly. Like your legs have to be perfectly straight and your toes perfectly pointed. And you have to land these ridiculous tricks, spinning and twisting upside down in the air. And then you have to land with your feet together and be perfect and not move, not take a step, not wiggle, or you'll get points taken away, and there's this pursuit of the perfect 10. And on the one hand, like gymnastics was so good for me, not because of anything I just said, but because because it allowed me to like engage in activities where I was lifting my body weight against gravity and like engaging my sense of balance and like getting deep pressure input through my muscles. So all of that was really regulating for my nervous system. But at the same time, I developed an eating disorder in high school as my body started to change. And like I was like going through puberty, so I'm developing more fat content in my body and like couldn't handle it because it was interfering with what I'm supposed to be doing at gymnastics, and it changed how I looked. And it was like I really restricted my intake so much to try to stay in that perfect little girl gymnast body.
It's interesting. So much. I also think about so much of this, like eating disorder, perfectionism, that I will say with confidence, I don't think has disordered eating has affected every single one of the people I know in my life.
Mm.
So I think that especially girls, um, and young girls, and I think it's because of what you said, that there is this sort of perfect or good around the virginal and young. And when we're growing into being women, um, with our breasts and our hips, and it really freaks us out, and we go we think that's bad. And that we need to stay girlish.
Mm,
Uh, which is interesting because it's the contrast, what we were talking about earlier, of like the Virgin Mary and Mary Magdalene, right? Like the whore and the virgin.
yeah, purity. Oof.
Yeah. So
Mhm.
you go either one way or the other.
Right.
And yeah, I was just thinking about that is such a big driver for so many young girls, is that like needing to keep this body. And I weirdly feel so liberated from that. Um, Now that I'm older and over 30, because I don't have to be, or I cannot be, it's unattainable to be that anymore.
Right. Yeah. So it's like a release of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had this really weird thing actually when I was pregnant. I am a lot of times they tell you, and some people get their eating disorders get really triggered because you're getting bigger and bigger. But I felt a lot of freedom from it for the same reason, because it became sort of unattainable
Mm.
to have this body, because I mean, I can't. There's a baby growing inside me. So there's nothing you can do about that. You know?
Oh, that's a really great. Did you feel like that you felt healthier because of that?
Yeah, mentally for sure.
Mm.
But I also love how you describe that gymnastics, of course, had these benefits for you too. And that is, again, like there is no black and white, even when we're talking about these things and these experiences.
Yeah.
Same with being a good student. I mean, you
Mm.
probably did get a lot of good feelings out of being a good student. But then when you take it a little bit too far, that's not good for your mental health. You know,
Mm.
that's why I say I want to walk the middle path, going back to monks and Buddhism.
Yeah.
That that's my goal. I want to walk the middle path. That's my resistance against perfectionism
Hmm.
and the cultural binary.
Yeah. I love that. Option C. I feel like
Yes.
yes, that's so helpful. And there's something about you had mentioned anxiety and how it's very wrapped up with perfectionism. And with anxiety, there can be a lot of black and white thinking
Mm,
when the brain is really scared. It's really hard to think of option C or D or E. You know, like when you're scared, you believe that there is only one way, or it's this or that. And it's really hard to imagine something else. And that's because imagination requires creativity. And when we don't feel safe, we can't be creative. We can't figure out a different way to do it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it also that made me think about though that option C is also a privilege in a way, because so many people can't have the feeling of safety,
Mm.
which is also really sad to think about in
Yeah.
general.
Mhm.
Because it's like Maslow's hierarchy, you know, you need to have your other needs met
Yeah. Basic needs met before you
before basic needs met. Yeah.
options.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. I was like, how do you describe Maslow's hierarchy?
I know it's something on the bottom and then more on
Yeah. Ay, ay, ay. But yeah, that's I also think it's interesting what you're talking about with fear. And it actually does weirdly go back to what I was saying about young girls with eating disorders, and that you're growing up and things are going fast and you're getting your
top.
breasts and your period and this and that. And there's so much fear also when
Mhm.
you're a teenager, like you're suddenly becoming so attuned to the world. You have a whole new perspective on life and everything feels so raw.
Mhm.
And it's hard because that is also when we develop our coping mechanisms and our coping skills.
Mhm.
So how, you know, how do we not develop sort of these more self-destructive coping skills, or how do we lean into the
Mhm.
gymnastics part of you that was good for you, for
Yeah.
example? because that was good for you and that was a good coping skill. But then there was this other side to it that was very self-destructive
Yeah.
because of the culture of gymnastics.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And because of the greater societal culture around like femininity too, I think it's really hard. Well, it's really hard when you're, as a young person, and as a teenager, you don't have the ability yet in your brain to self-regulate, you know? And so we need someone to help us. We need co-regulation. We need someone to do it with us in a healthy way. And we don't always have that. We don't always have a mentor or a parent or somebody who has healthy coping strategies and who recognizes when we need help with those, and can show us and help us develop the coping strategies in the right way, or in a healthy way.
Right.
You know, I don't want to say right because there's not one right way.
Well, right, exactly. I mean, and I think that it's so true what you're saying. And so much of the work that you do, I always think about how it's so parallel to parenting human children,
Yeah.
because a toddler, I see my daughter when she has these big emotions, she is not capable of regulating them. She can't developmentally.
Yeah, she's still nervous.
And yeah, and she needs help, just what you're saying. And so we practice coping things when she's not in that state. And then when she's in that state, I have to hold her and breathe for her,
Mhm.
because she can't do it herself. Um, and I think it's this style of parenting that we're seeing a lot more of these days. I'm hoping that that creates a generation of children that are very emotionally aware and able to regulate their emotions better.
Yeah.
Um, but it does go into being a teenager too, because it's hard though, because you're not looking towards your parents at that point anymore. You're looking towards your peers and how do they deal with stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's why these eating disorders and smoking the jewel and, what drinking, whatever else is so. I mean, I used to do these talks to people about substance abuse to high schools in another life.
Yeah.
And I would say, I'm not telling you to not experiment with those things,
Mhm.
but at the same time, there needs to be a development of healthy coping skills, because otherwise you're going to get into adulthood and you're not going to have that repertoire.
Mhm.
And that will turn into these very self-destructive behaviors around numbing.
Mhm.
Um, because that's all you know. So at the same time, and I think that's why sports are great if you take out or art or whatever, like it is, those things are very helpful for the long term. And then as adults, we just have to remember to actually engage in those activities that used to make us feel good.
Yeah. Right. And
You
not
know,
get wrapped up in this like being the perfect adult who only works and never plays and doesn't get messy.
exactly. Because we do feel that way as
Mhm.
adults.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have to get my charger.
Okay, I'm going to pause this and we'll take a little quick break. We are so grateful to Benson's Pet Center for partnering with us on today's episode. Benson's Pet Center is a multi-generational, family-owned and operated business with 8 locations in the New York Capital Region. Benson's has the largest selection of pet food in the area. If they don't have what you're looking for, they'll even order it for you. You can bring your dog with you to pick out their favorite treats, and you can even give them a bath at the self-serve dog wash in 3 of their locations. Benson's has competitive pricing even on subscription services, and I love knowing that my dollars are supporting a local business. The customer service at Benson's is consistently unparalleled, and the staff's extensive knowledge on pet nutrition is amazing. Can't make it out to the store? No problem. Order online before 3 p.m. on weekdays, and Benson's offers same day delivery. And curbside pickup is available 7 days a week. Benson's Pet Center, where the motto is, "We love your pets." Thank you, Benson's. Now back to the show. All right. So I'm wondering, Angela, I noticed actually I'm sitting at the top of I'm like sitting forward on my chair. And then as I started to talk, I sounded more performative, which I talked about like trying to be more relaxed. So I'm going to like sit back in my chair. And now I'm going to ask you, how are you doing in this conversation? And do you feel okay to start wrapping up?
Thanks for asking. And also thanks for noticing. I swear, as soon as you hit the record, it makes you want to act or something.
Yeah,
It's funny.
I feel like I'm on a stage.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. I feel really good about this conversation. I have been really in the moment the whole time. I don't even remember what we were talking about. Oh my gosh, there's a fly on my, do you see the fly? He's been watching us the whole time. Sorry, listeners, that sounds, maybe we're being a little too casual now.
Actual fly on
This
on the screen.
He's been watching us really the whole time, and I've been watching him clean himself. Or her, or it, or them. I don't know.
That's a good mindful activity.
Yeah, watch a fly.
Yeah,
it is a great mindfulness activity. Anyway, Mr. Fly is here.
This is great for our perfectionism about our podcast because the fly like just flew in front of your camera. Thank you, Fly.
Thank you, Fly. No, but I've been feeling, I really appreciate how vulnerable we've both been. I'll pat myself on the back as well for that. And I think there's so many themes that come out of our own experiences that I hope, it can make other people or listeners just think bigger about perfectionism and what it means and where it comes from and how it affects everyone. But yeah, other than that, I mean, like I said, I think that it's hard to sum it up because it runs my life so much. But I think that's a decent summary of the history of perfectionism in my life and in yours, and some of how it still pops up in our daily lives.
Yeah, well said. Thank you so much for being willing to re-record this, even if it means we have to like push our, release date or try again. I was so grateful to you for being open to that and trying things a little bit differently, even if it meant we had to break out of our rigid structure that we were in and try option C.
I love it. Option C. Always go with option C.
All right, I'm going to do an anti-perfectionism somatic exercise. If you want to join me, I'm going to stand up and do the wet dog shake and shake my whole body to get me nice and relaxed. I need to have a lot of space so you can see me. But I'm just gonna shake it, shake my arms, twist my body. Muckins is like, what are you doing? You take a nap. All right. Well, thank you. That was really good.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you later.
Bye.
Even though we are licensed professionals in our own field of work, Angela, LCSW, Sharon, OTD, and CDBC, this podcast is not intended to replace individual therapy for humans or behavior support for dogs. We approach our conversations from an exploratory, observational, and strictly personal lens.
If you are struggling with your mental health, your dog's behavior, or if you or your dog have experienced a recent traumatic event, please see the resources section on our websites for a list of resources and places that can help. Visit either www.hc-collab.com/happydoghappyhuman or www.clouddoodles.com/happydoghappyhuman. This podcast is made possible by the collaboration between Cloud Doodles and Human Canine Collaborative. Check out our websites at www.clouddoodles.com or www.hc-collab.com. Special thanks to Tom Fox at Tom Fox Photos for support with editing and production consulting. You can find Tom at tomfoxphotos.com. Also, special thanks to sound effects and story examples from Duchess and Muggins. We could not and would not ever want to do this without you. If you are struggling with your mental health, your dog's behavior, or if you or your dog have experienced a recent traumatic event, please see the resources section on our websites for a list of resources and places that can help. Visit either www.hc-collab.com/happydoghappyhuman or www.clouddoodles.com/happydoghappyhuman. For additional show notes, including books and articles that we mentioned, please check out the footnotes section on our websites, either www.hc-collab.com/happydoghappyhuman or www.clouddoodles.com/happydoghappyhuman. Also, special thanks to sound effects and story examples from Duchess and Muggins. We could not and would not ever want to do this without you.